let's talk about how to set up camera animations in your gameplay. So I have a quick key here that's going to play as a camera animation. You'll notice that it's in 16:9. There's a little bit of a limitation there in order to make things smooth to actually work with, which can be a little bit annoying. But it's as easy as I just press a button and it plays a camera animation relative to my current character. So we're here in an empty project. The finished project will be down below in the description for patrons and YouTube members as always to download. I don't know how relevant that'll be for this video since it's actually fairly straightforward and simple, but if you want to poke around in it a little bit, that is an option. But let's just get straight into it. Setting up the actual code for this is fairly easy. What we're going to do is we're going to make a blueprint class of type normal actor, and we'll call that something like BP camera player. When we open that up, we're going to add a new component to this, which will be a cinema camera. This is why it turned to 16:9 when we actually played the animation, because cinema cameras will display in a specific aspect ratio, as you can choose here in your film back. And you need to use a cinema camera here, specifically because of the way that camera animations work. They expect a cinema camera, which is highly annoying. Kind of just the way that we have to deal with it. Cinema cameras will also have depth of field, which might be annoying to deal with. And you might not want that in your gameplay at all. So in order to fix that, you're going to come down here to current aperture and just set that to 22, which is the highest that it can go. A very high aperture means that there's effectively going to be no depth of field effect, so it'll always be like very sharp, just like a normal gameplay camera would be. Then, going into the event graph, we're going to just get rid of everything that exists in here, and we will make a new custom event instead. That custom event will be play camera animation. With that, we will use the gameplay camera subsystem. Now, if you're using a newer version of Unreal, I think in 5.5, this has changed into a different subsystem. In 5.5, you use the engine camera subsystem instead to play camera animations. There's also the camera animation sequence subsystem. That doesn't have this same node. It might have something else that deals with this. So don't get that confused. Don't use this one. Use the engine camera subsystem. But for anything under 5.5, you use the camera gameplay subsystem, from which we will play a camera animation, for which we need to play a controller and the sequence that we're going to be playing. So the sequence that we'll be playing obviously will be an input parameter for this event that we're making. And then the player controller can just be get player controller, as easy as that. For the parameters, you can split them up if you want to and fill out effectively any of what you want to do here. I don't think any of this is particularly relevant, so I'm just going to recombine that and kind of ignore it. Then, using the player controller again, we'll set the view target of that player controller to this actor. So we'll just use a reference to self, because we want to be looking through this camera when we do all of that. With the blend time of 0, blend time should be 0. We want to just instantly switch to this. And then we want to delay for the amount of time that this sequence is going to take. So we pull over the sequence and we get the playback end in seconds. Put that at the very end here and use that value to populate a delay node. Now with this, I like to make this into a separate new custom event again, which is stop camera animation, and just run that stop camera animation event after the delay. And you won't be surprised to find out that we can use the camera subsystem to also stop playing a camera animation, for which we use the handle that we got from our first play camera animation into here, so that it knows which one to stop playing and on which player controller, obviously. So we need to give that in as well. And you can do it immediate. It doesn't really need to be, because we haven't set up any blending in or out of these animations anyway. But if you do and you want the animation to stop immediately for whatever reason and ignore all of the blending in and out, you can take that to being true. Then we set the view target with blend again, but this time we set the new view target to being the get player character, because we're going to go back to looking at the world from the player character's perspective. Then I like to build in a bit of a delay here before destroying this actor, just to make sure that like everything has been properly transferred back to the player. This isn't strictly speaking necessary, most of the time, but it's just for a little bit of safety. And that sets up the actor that we're going to be spawning in to play the camera animation. So let's go real quick into our third-person character to implement this on just a debug key. So let's add a debug key for the F. And what we're going to do here is going to be fairly self-explanatory. When we press this, we will spawn an actor of class, which will be, of course, our BP camera player. The spawn transform will be the exact transform as this actor, so get actor transform. Then I personally like to also attach this actor to our player, so we can attach actor to actor, and then the parent actor will be in this case self, because we're running this from the player character. So we're telling this thing, hey, attach yourself to the player character, and I'm going to snap to target just in case. This way, if we move during the camera animation will move with us. Now, depending on whether or not you want that, maybe don't do this, obviously, but I like doing this, just because. And then we'll use this value from the spawning node to also play the camera animation. That takes in a sequence, which we don't have any yet, so we need to make one. Now, this obviously would be populated by a variable in a dynamic system, which is going to make one and run that. But realistically, you would make this into its own custom event that then forwards this value, and you can call this to play any camera animation that you want. So how do we make a camera animation? Well, I'm going to delete these two walls, and you'll see why in a moment. Because you need to make a camera animation from world position 0, 0, 0. Because any camera animation that you're going to be playing is going to be playing relative to wherever this actor is going to be existing in the world. So you set up all the animation data to run from world 0, 0, 0, because that's going to translate into being the relative 0, 0, 0 of wherever you spawn in the camera player actor. So let's just pull in a third-person character here and set that to location 0, 0 as a reference point. And you can obviously make this thing play any sort of animations in the actual animation sequence that we're going to be working with as a reference, which I'll show you in a moment. So let's make a camera animation, which you can do in cinematics, camera animation sequence, and we'll call this cam animation 1. If we open that up, we can see that it spawns in a cinema camera actor. And this is kind of what I was talking about before. This works only with cinema cameras, even if we add a normal camera actor to the world, right? So we just have a normal camera actor that we add to the world. We try to add that into this. It's not going to let us. So we need to work with cinema cameras, annoyingly, but we do. So we can lock it to the viewport, and then we can move it into place, set its transform as the first keyframe, and then we move it like 90 frames forward or something like that, about 3 seconds. Set another keyframe, see how this does. That's pretty good. Move it forward a little bit more to 150, and like I said, one more keyframe. You will notice that the depth of field is all out of whack, because this one actually does spawn in with depth of field, but because of the one that we set having a aperture of 22, it's not going to be an issue. But now we have like this camera sequence for this animation, which is less than amazing, but it works out fairly well. The upside of using a cinema camera on both our actor and in the sequences is that we very much can animate its camera component values as well. So if we go into the camera component, we have things like maybe the focal length, which is the cinema camera equivalent of field of view. So it starts off at about 35 as the default, but maybe we want it to become a little bit more zoomed in here, and then it should zoom back out at this point into like a much wider shot again, right? So it'll actually animate that in our camera animation as well. And that actually makes the whole movement feel a lot more smooth, funnily enough. And now we can play this camera animation fairly easily. But what if we want the camera animation to sync up with some sort of like animation action that we have? Well, that is also a possibility to do. For that we need a cinematic, just a level sequence, and we'll call this cam animation 1 reference or something like that. Add in a cinema camera to that, which we'll set to 000 as well by default. Drag that into here. We can actually add a camera animation track to this. So template sequence, camera animation 1. And now you will see that this has... Now anything that we animate in here is going to override it. So we want to set our camera components and our transform. We want to delete all of those. And now it displays this 100% properly. So if we now add in our third person character here as well, which again is just going to be an actor for reference, we can go into our skeletal mesh and either animate something like as an animation that we're going to be able to export and then like use a gameplay animation maybe, or what we can do instead is play a pre-existing gameplay animation, something like jumping, and that way we will be able to use that animation as a reference for our camera animation. And the most wonderful thing is if we go into our camera animation here and we double click this, we'll actually still have our reference point of any character animation that was playing on that sequence before. Whereas if we just open the camera animation directly, we won't have that animating. So if you want that reference, open up the level sequence that you used, that you created for the reference, and then open up the camera animation through that, and you'll be able to animate based on some animation character reference. Either way, we now have a camera animation, so let's go back into our third person character and select our camera animation sequence. Then play the game, press our Bebo key, and you will see that it plays our camera animation that we made just as we made it. And when it finishes, we go back to our normal gameplay camera. So that's how to make a camera animation in Unreal Engine for gameplay purposes. It's a little bit of a weird way of doing things. It's not always exactly the easiest to do, but it certainly is easier than doing it all through only Blueprint's camera manager type shenanigans, because that gets really difficult really quickly when you have more complex movements. So this still is a better alternative. And a very big thank you to all my Patreons. You can see them on screen right now. If you want to help support the channel or get any of the project files in any of my tutorials, there's a link down below to the Patreon page to support me, or alternatively as a YouTube member. And of course, an extra massive thank you to my Cave Digger tier supporters, Sir J. Thomas, and my Cave Student tier supporters, Oiku and Earl Monsville Urno.